Welcome to Follow Your Curiosity, where we explore the inner workings of the creative process. I'm your host, Nancy Norbeck. I started this podcast in no small part to showcase how we're all creative, even if we or society think we're not. My guest today knows what it's like to believe you're not creative. Lisa Townsend spent her first 27 years believing she wasn't before having a creative awakening that led her to try everything. We talk about what that looked like for her and what she learned about fear, knowledge, what we have, what we don't, and what we just think we have, and courage. These days, through her business, Change Your Badge, she uses what she's learned creatively and professionally to help women get past their fear, shame, and overwhelm so they can run their businesses successfully. I think you'll get a lot out of my conversation with Lisa Townsend. Lisa, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to doing it.
Me too. So I'm curious to hear your creative story. How did you get started doing creative things? Were you a creative kid?
Well, I think me and creativity met up late in life. And like looking back on it now from my 40-something years, I was quite a creative kid, but I had a real defined, like a real definition of what creativity looked like. And so I felt like I wasn't it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's thanks to my sister. So my sister is this gorgeous being who is extra creative. And there's not even 2 years between us. So we're very close. But she was just everything I wasn't. She was confident and she sang and she acted and she's quite extroverted and people just warmed to her instantly. And she did art and she did drama. She was even good at sports. She's very annoying to have as a sister.
I can imagine.
Yeah. And also, like, my dad was creative in the most obvious way I could see that as a kid, in that he sang too. So him and my sister both shared this love of singing and had a confidence to do that in front of other people. And I had none of that. So I firmly came up with the idea that I wasn't creative. And the nearest I got to that was I played piano. So and I did it in a very, straight-laced grades, lessons, scales kind of way. Mm-hmm. So it felt very kind of like logical and progressive. And you did your grade 1 and then you did your grade 2 and you followed it in a process. So I felt like that was like as near as I got to it, really. My mum was really creative too. She made lots of things. So she would make clothes and there was a real like entrepreneurialism was big in my house. Not really as a like if I had said that as a kid, nobody would have known what I was going on about. But looking back now, it was a mode of survival, really. Everybody had multiple jobs, did things, worked around things. So that's the kind of environment I grew up in. And then I feel like I found my own creativity. Like I allowed myself to consider that I was creative when I had my kids. Mm-hmm. So I had my first daughter when I was 27, and it was a bit of a shock to people that I was adamant, grew up adamant that I wasn't going to have kids, and then when I did, I just had this overwhelming sense that if I could do that, if I could have a baby, I could literally do anything. And it just like opened up this whole like world for me, really. And I just set about, along with having raising a child and learning how to be a parent, I just set on this massive creative endeavor and I just couldn't stop. So I just did everything. And having kids is the most brilliant excuse to be creative,
Yes.
and because it wasn't my mess, it was theirs. And we could just get into, I've got two daughters, so we could just get into all the painting and the mess making and the building stuff and going outside. I live in the countryside, so there was lots of opportunity to get creative there, and the storytelling. And I set up my own business. I was a baby signing teacher, so I learned how to do that, and I set up my own business. And I went out and met new people, and I bought myself a electric piano and decided I was going to have another go at it. But this time, my focus was I was going to do it in a band. And luckily, having creative family, and my partner, his family also creative and into music, we made this big family band. And yeah, my 30th birthday, that's what I did. We played. I joined a amateur dramatic group, again for my daughter. We did a community play together, and the next year I got a lead role playing Maria in The Sound of Music.
Wow.
I know, if I'd known anything about musicals at the time, I would have had a serious word with myself. What are you doing? But because I was just so new to everything, I guess I was a bit I felt like a kid. I was, a 30-something-year-old kid who was going to give it a go. And that was just I just learned masses doing that. And just discovered all these new sides to myself I had no idea existed, and I just loved every minute of it.
That's fantastic. Especially, I'm hearing a couple of things, which the one is, you spent 27 years convinced that you were not any of these things, which is a long, long time.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, it's like you not only found the interest in trying it, which I'm not saying that you didn't have the interest before, because I think you probably did, but a hell of a lot of creative courage to just say, you know what? It's time. Doing all the things right now. Let's go.
Yeah. Yeah. It looking back on it, that's exactly what it felt like. At the time, it was I think it was completely fueled by curiosity. And it was just addictive. Once I gave myself permission to consider that I could do these things. And actually it wasn't, creativity wasn't a God-given gift. It was something that everybody could access in some way. I guess I was just following the thread to see where it would end, and if it would. And I became like the biggest. I would evangelize about creativity to everybody, because people would struggle to keep up with what I was doing, and so many new things that I would be doing. My dear husband. God, I think of some of the things he walked in on, the things we were doing, and it was. And I have no doubt that some people thought I was going through some kind of crisis, maybe, but I just loved it, and at the same time, I'd never been so scared doing some of the things I was doing. I'd never felt fear like it. But particularly with like some of the things I felt like I learned most from were had people in them, other people. And really, like, my creativity has taken me to communities, really. And I also learned that creativity, what you see, when you go and watch, I don't ever seen plays and musicals and things, mainly that my sister had been in. And you see the end result. You see that amazing magical thing that's happening in front of you, and you have no idea of what goes on in the run up and the process and the volume of people that are holding that person up. And I really remember feeling that when I did my first, it wasn't that first lead role I did, because that was a roller coaster of wildness and emotion. But I did my most recent leading lady role that I took, which was a couple of years ago. I remember standing on the stage and I had a spotlight moment, and I was intensely aware of all the people that were behind me that couldn't be seen. Everybody who was there, just feeling that, like being held by them, and the work that goes into it. And from my previous life, like, I could do work, I could do that. I knew what that felt like. So it was a real thrill to feel like not only could I discover all these new things, but I could merge them with some of my existing ways, to make something new. So yeah, it was great.
Yeah. You're reminding me of my own theater experiences, which are a little too long ago for my liking. But you're absolutely right. There's so many things that go on backstage. And I was in the unusual situation as a kid where the principal of my elementary school was a total theater geek. And so he decided, I think when I was in first or second grade, that he was going to have the fourth, fifth, and sixth graders do the Broadway musical version of, I think it was Alice in Wonderland.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, it was just a school production, right? But it was the full musical. He had auditions and choreographer and the whole deal. And I remember sitting there watching it with the rest of the school, just thinking this was the greatest thing I had ever seen. And that, I wanted to do this too. And 3 years later, he did The Wizard of Oz.
Oh, yeah.
And I just had a chorus part, but it was still, it was the greatest thing I had ever done. And my mom played in the pit orchestra. And so, and I think she had the first time too with Alice in Wonderland. I'll have to ask her. But I saw enough rehearsal that I really started to think, and I still pretty much think this, which is not to diss the final performance at all. Because when a final performance comes together, as I'm sure you know, it is one of the most amazing things in the universe. But there's so much magic in rehearsal too.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the pressure is off compared to performance. So, you corpse your lines on stage and everybody just falls apart giggling. And, you have all of these goofy relationships that I don't know. I mean, I've sung in choirs, I've done community theater. There's probably this happens in other places too. But to me, they're just this kind of friendship and relationship that you don't find in other contexts. You certainly don't find it working in an office unless you're super lucky. That I think it's an interesting chicken and egg question, right? Like, does it come from being in the creative environment, or does it come from the people who want to be in the creative environment? Where does this energy come from? I think it's kind of symbiotic, probably.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I was having this conversation the other day, and I agree with you that like sometimes so opening night's like the thing that you're aiming for, and the particular theatre I'm at is an open air amphitheatre with a cover.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's a really unique experience. But one of the things that's unique about it is that it runs in the summer, which isn't traditionally when a lot of theatre gets done. And it has a way of running shows, so you do blocks of them. So you don't do your run and then that's it. It will span over a couple of months. And sometimes when we get to opening night, like I kind of like, oh, like oh, it's this bit. Like, because it's so different. It's almost like you're saying goodbye to a portion of what you've done,
Mm-hmm.
and now this takes on a different experience in a different form. You're about to learn different things. um and I say the same for playing in a band. The rehearsal process, like some of the magic that you have, I'm not saying like perfect playing magic, but just that magic of being with other people, and just the feel of making music together. It's not, it's, you don't always, you're very lucky, I think, if you get that feeling in a performance,
Mm-hmm.
because there's so many other things. You're doing somebody's wedding, and their first dance, or you're desperately trying to remember the lyric of, yeah. It's different, but yeah, that rehearsal process, and I try and take that, what I learned from that, and think about it in business nowadays when I'm running my own business, that so much is often pinned on the end result or getting to the end, but it's really taking time to enjoy that process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there are a lot of people who have trouble fathoming that the actual process and the journey is something to be enjoyed.
Mm.
Was that English what I just said?
Yeah, well, I understood it.
Yeah, I think, that's why you hear people say life is a journey, not a destination, because we
Yeah.
lose that so much.
Mm.
So yeah, I like that you've taken it from theater and rehearsal. That's a great angle to look at it from, which makes me wish that more people had that experience.
Yeah, I mean, very privileged. And like you mentioned about having that experience with your mum being there, I've had the experience of acting on stage with both my daughters. So the Maria role, um, my oldest then, she was 5 going on 6, and she played Gretel.
Oh, excellent.
And that was just, it's an experience that we'll never ever have again. And it was just magical. And
Hmm.
I've had the same experience acting with both of them on stage. Um, yeah, yeah.
I want to go back to something you said a couple minutes ago about how you were never as scared as you were when you were trying
Mm.
all of these things. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. Um, ugh, it's like therapy. It's like therapy. It's just that incredible, like the whole process of theatre, and even doing any kind of live performance, and especially with theatre, in that you're doing, you do auditions and rehearsals, um, in front of people that you don't know, um, and just the vulnerability that comes with that, um, but also the kind of fear that's a good fear, that's that nervous excitement that you want to follow, and you want to have in your life, um, and then learning how to manage the not so good fear alongside that, the fear that compares you to somebody else, or the fear of making a mistake and letting people down, or the fear of not being good enough, um, the fear that comes when you're tired, and perhaps you've over rehearsed that day, or you've done a lot of back to back, and you're just so tired, and the fear that then likes to fill that space, and learning how to manage all of that, and allowing both sides to have space within you, um, that was just a whole new experience for me. So visceral. um a lot, there's only so much you can know in your head, but
Yeah.
but that kind of experience, you feel it everywhere, and it's so indelible. It just, um once you have it, there's just so much learning and insight, and incredible stuff which comes out of that. But um yeah, learning to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. I think that there's no, and yeah, that's a good good way of putting it, definitely.
Yeah. And
Mm.
I think that's a skill that we would all, it would be great if they taught it to us, when we're 5.
Mm.
Though when we're
Yeah,
5, I think we're already pretty uncomfortable with being, or pretty comfortable with being uncomfortable. It's like
yes,
we don't think about it so much. We're not overthinking it. We're
yeah.
not worrying about what other people think. We're just doing
Mm.
our crazy thing. It's as we get older and we realize that people are looking and, somebody might think this and somebody
Mm.
might not like that and whatever. And I'm just wondering, like, is there, because I'm sure some of this is just like almost like muscle memory for you, but which is difficult to quantify. But is there anything that you learned about dealing with fear that you can share with us?
Um, so I think one of the most, so a lot of my experiences, I think, um, I've ended up developing into tools, and learning how fear and curiosity can work together is one of the most helpful things. I use it every day, every single day. And now I don't use it just with myself, but I also use it with the clients I work with too. And I think that when I learned some of the kind of theory behind fear, so I guess I experienced it first, and then I learned some of the theory, and I was like, oh right, yeah, I can see what that is, um, and learned that not all fear is bad,
Mm-hmm.
but there is a certain level of uncomfortableness with all types of fear, and um, but I also learned that you can't be afraid and curious at the same time.
Mm,
Those
yeah.
two states just can't happen. You can definitely flip between the two fairly quickly, but you can't embody both at the same time. And so I learned then to like it made it like the fear is still there, but it made me feel more confident about the fact that I could manage it and still take steps forward whilst it was still there. I could just turn it down, or maybe make it feel less intense. And by asking myself questions about being curious around it, um, I think that that's one of the tools that I really took out of that experience. Um, yeah, yeah.
It's, I don't know. Do you guys have, because I know it's a streaming thing, so I have no idea how it works over on your side of the pond. But there's a TV series that I've been watching called Ted Lasso. Have you
No, I
heard of
don't
it?
know it. I don't know it.
Ah, because it's the old fish out of water trope,
Hmm.
and it's this woman who has become the owner of a football team near London, I think, after a divorce, a very contentious divorce. And because it was so near and dear to her husband's heart, she is determined to destroy it in any way she possibly can. So she hires a an American football coach from Kansas who I'm not even sure now what level. I mean, it's not like he was, an NFL level coach. I think
Hmm.
it was, college level at best, to come and be the coach of this team for a sport that he does not know. And she's just convinced that he's an idiot and he will admirably perform the task for which he does not know he has been hired.
Yeah.
And there's a great moment where he embarrasses the snooty ex-husband, who's beautifully played by Anthony Head. And he makes a comment in the process about how, you know, people who think they know everything tend to think that that means that they are perfectly suited to judge everyone else. And
Mm.
because they think they know everything, they aren't curious. Because if they
Mm.
were curious, they would ask questions
Yeah.
rather than making assumptions. And he's totally using the assumptions that he knows that Mr. Snooty has against him. And it's a stunning moment. And I don't want to say anything more than that because I don't want to spoil anybody who hasn't seen it. But
Mm-hmm.
it really made an impression on me. It's that same thing, because I think judgment
Mm.
is so tied into fear because we're
Mm-hmm.
judging ourselves.
Mm.
And it's also tied into that sense. I think he's totally right. You think you know everything.
Mm.
Odds are really good you don't know everything. None of us know everything.
No.
We may have enough experience to make a pretty good educated guess, but we could still be wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's like that for me really makes me think about the different forms of knowing that you have.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just one type, but we
Yes.
tend to give it a lot of priority, and we we reward it
Mm-hmm.
a lot in
We
society
worship it.
too. Yes, yes. um and also there's a difference between knowing things about yourself and then assuming then you use that to know everything about everybody else.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your sample size is actually one.
Yes.
It's pretty small.
Yes. I used to be in one of my many hundreds of jobs that I've had in my life. One of them, I was an early years teacher here, and and so my 3-year-olds were my jam, and so you get to meet
As well they should be.
yes, and I would meet a lot of new mums and a lot of new parents, and you would be assumed that you would know things. And I did have some experience. I was particularly interested and had experience of working with children who had different kind of educational needs and behavioral needs. But I used to say, like, I'm an expert of two, my own, and that's kind of it. um, it it doesn't mean that I'm an expert on everybody else's children. You are the experts as the parents. And
Even then, you might not be quite as expert as you think you are.
yes, or you'd like to be.
Especially depending on how old they are.
Yeah, exactly. And I just think, oh God, what a lot of pressure to know everything as well.
Yeah.
That's a lot of pressure to put on yourself, which completely ties in with that judgment, because you've just got another big stick to beat yourself with then.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas when when you don't know something, it just lightens. I mean, maybe if you're a brain surgeon and you don't know something, that's an issue.
That might be a
But
problem.
yes, but in general life, just not knowing something and opening that up, it lightens everything.
It
And
does. And it comes back to what you were saying before about being comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because I think that's where, just as we're having this conversation, I'm seeing that's where the parent of the 3-year-old wants you to have all the answers, because they're like, I don't know what I'm doing.
yes,
And they're terrified that they're going to ruin their kid, that, whatever. And I mean, certainly people do things that end up having long-term effects, but that happens to everybody. Everybody's going
yeah,
to screw something up. But it's also just like, it's the fear, it's the discomfort. And I think we just feel like if we knew everything, then everything would be okay.
yes, yes.
And I mean, as I'm saying this, I'm thinking 2020 would like a word.
Yes, yes.
I mean, if we had any idea, anybody who thought they knew everything before, say, February 15th of 2020, found out in a hurry this year how much they did not know. And we're still here.
Yeah.
We figured it out. I think, we worship this knowledge, and we don't give enough credit to the fact that human beings are really adaptable and creative on the whole, and we'll figure out how to work with stuff if we just give ourselves the chance, or are forced to by 2020. And
Yeah.
we don't think about that part. We don't have any faith in our ability to rise to the occasion and come up with something that works because we think we have to know everything all the time.
Yes. And it's that falsehood that control means things will be okay, or you'll be able to
Yes.
sort them out. And actually, then you go back to the knowing everything. In actual fact, it more than likely means there's a lot of pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a really interesting kind of two sides of a coin, in that, when we're really passionate about something, or we're really curious and we're doing something we love. So people might say to me, oh, I could never do that. And I'm kind of like, well, what could you do? What would you like? And when they talk about something that really lights them up, the thing that is really appealing is this kind of almost the not knowing, the kind of figuring it out, or not knowing what the end result's going to look like. But when you have that kind of mindset that you're using every day, which really revolves around the fear and the control, you can't have, like you said earlier, you can't have the fear and the curiosity at the same time.
Yeah.
It's there's got to be some kind of give in there. And it's a false sense of security at that.
Yes.
It's a voice which is telling you that things will be better if you were in control of them, and if you and if you knew all the outcomes. But actually the evidence suggests that's not true.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And I feel like, it's a cultural voice.
Yes.
I mean, because most of us have it.
Mm.
Some people are lucky and don't, but most of us do.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's definitely a voice that's, so having done a lot of work around fear and big emotions, the most common emotions I come across in my work is fear and guilt and shame. And I think that those types of emotions and fear responses, we all have them because we're hardwired for them. And I think they can express themselves through a particular narrative or a voice. And I call it's the inner critic is what I refer to it as.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how that gets expressed. It's really good at masking itself and covering itself up and hiding out as other people. It's also really good at linking into those cultural messages that we have, or those social messages. But it's just a voice.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that so many of us are used to hearing it so frequently and loudly, we forget there's any other option.
Right. We think it's our voice.
Yeah. And that's what I thought for years. That was me, firmly not creative. I called myself academic instead. That was my
Mm-hmm.
box. And there was a voice that looked for any sign to prove that, yes, I definitely wasn't that. And it was all based in big emotions, in worry and fear and making mistakes and not looking like somebody else. And yeah, so
comparison to your sister.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Comparison is an evil, evil beast.
Yeah, it's a real tricky. It's a tricky part of that. Whole topic around fear
Mm-hmm.
and critic and judgment, like you've already said. Yeah. And we so often we're not even good at comparing ourselves to the right people. I don't compare myself to somebody who's 6 months ahead of me in life. I'm comparing myself to Oprah every day.
Right.
Like if you were going to do that logically or rationally and do something where you would compare, you would align yourself in a much more clear way. But yeah,
you would. And you would also, there's a quote that I'm not even going to try to get totally right, and I don't remember who said it, but you know, don't compare your behind the scenes to everybody else's highlight reel. It's kind of like what you were saying
Mm.
earlier about everything
Yes.
that goes on behind the show before
Yes.
it goes up that the audience doesn't see. You know, it's sort of like the proverbial how the sausage is made, you know? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
not that backstage at a theater show is as ugly as that, but you know,
I
it's
know.
the part they don't see. They don't see how many times the lead screwed up the same line
Mm-hmm.
and was convinced they were never ever going to get it right and they were going to fall flat on their face on stage. You
Mm-hmm.
know, they don't see the number of times that the prop fell over. They have no clue,
No.
because by opening night, Lord willing,
Yes.
everything goes the way it's supposed to go, and it's beautiful, and it all comes together and the magic happens. But
Yeah.
they don't see all of that stuff that went on. And we all have our behind the scenes. You know, we all have our insecurities and our fears and our failed attempts and all of these things. And if you're just looking at Oprah, I guarantee you Oprah has insecurities and failed
Mm-hmm.
attempts and all sorts of stuff that you don't see,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
anyone else like her.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we think
Definitely.
that's reality and that's
Yeah.
how it should be. And that's crazy.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, I definitely for all of that.
So tell me how you started working with clients and what you do with them.
So my curiosity got me down that path as well. When I when I was firmly not creative and I was academic, um, my what I wanted to be was a psychologist, and I went to university to study psychology. And then after that, um, I didn't want to do any more theory. I wanted to work, and I was really interested in business. Um, and so I got a job in business, learning how to make money. And then literally, my life has flip flopped between those two kind of areas of jobs involving people and then jobs involving business. And I would go backwards and forwards between, and there was a sprinkling of businesses in there as well. Um, and then I really wanted to have the people part as a route. And I was really into mindfulness at the time. And I wanted to train as a coach. I wanted to do coaching. Um, but I didn't want to do anything. I didn't do any, want to do anything that was available.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted,
I recognize this feeling.
yeah, I wanted to, I knew by then that I did things best when I was learning and doing, very quick succession, almost together, almost like improv almost.
Mm-hmm.
And everything I looked at had a lot of learning before you were allowed to get messy with any of the doing, apart from a creativity and mindfulness coaching accreditation that I found. So I dived into that, and that gave me my coaching skills. And then after that, I went on a year-long program with other women through a business coach. I knew I wanted to turn it into a business. I wanted to do it. And then really I spent a year figuring out how I was going to put that all together. And if I'm honest, I'm a year into running my business. I've done my first year. 2020 has been my first year of business. Yes, what a great year!
What a first year!
Yes. And I only just feel like now I'm really hitting the mark of actually getting clear on who it is I like to help and who it is I feel I help best. So that process brought me to make my business, which is called Change Your Badge. And that was really about kind of accepting all the shades of grey there are in between the black and the white, or the creative and non-creative, or whatever you want to be. And nowadays, at the moment, what I'm doing is I'm loving working with women entrepreneurs, and I help them with their focus and their planning, and also their overwhelm. So
That's big.
Yeah. So I bring like my business sides to it, and work through very practical kind of more structure, in a way that works for them. But I also bring a lot of my experience of dealing with big emotions, and mental health stuff that I have too, and I bring that in, and that's the kind of emotional support piece. So yeah, I'm just loving
Wow,
doing
that
that.
sounds really cool.
Yeah, it is great.
Is there something that seems to come up for almost everybody that you work with, or is it really, really varied?
Mm. Well, I mean, it has been varied, but as I feel like I'm kind of understanding where I'm fitting and following the threads, like I'm always doing, um, the piece around overthinking things and getting stuck in the knowledge, in the knowing, I need to know before I can do. That's
Mm-hmm.
something which comes up pretty much for everybody in some form or another. And fear, it's always there. And just helping people to, break down what it is for them and build tools to kind of, before I start doing anything, like, let's just acknowledge what's going on. And that's very much tied in with the overwhelm piece. And let's work on moving this, shifting it or reducing it or changing it up. And then let's just then get on with the work that needs to be done afterwards. Um, and that's lovely being able to, I kind of had this massive toolbox. I feel like I'm a collector of tools. And part of the process is matching up and bringing things in and seeing which ones people really run with, or listening for their own ones that they're bringing.
Yeah.
And kind of going, lush, let's use that. That's a great tool. And let's do more of that.
I like did you hear this thing you just said? Because this is really interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's brilliant. Because there's nothing better than, there's nothing better than turning up and realizing you don't have to change everything. You don't have to change yourself in order just to get on and do what you want to do. That's a great thing. And quite often I work with people who are neurodiverse in the way they think, or they come along and they'll have history of struggling with their mental health, or perhaps at the moment they've got tools that they're putting into place for that. And there's nothing greater than saying, it's all right, there's no fixing needed here.
Yeah.
Let's work with what you've got, and let's you don't have to, like one lady described it the other day. She said, I feel like I've spent my life trying to get through myself, and now I don't have to anymore.
Ooh.
I can just go along with myself.
Yeah. I mean, I think that a lot of times we get hung up on what we know and what we don't.
Yeah.
But we also get hung up on the whole, I'm not good enough, there's something wrong with me, whatever. And I feel like I should say here, I'm as guilty of these things as anybody else.
Yeah, me
I
too.
mean, I don't think either one of us is sitting here saying you should just give up on this because the knowing thing is stupid and we never do it because we're perfect. No. Right. We all do all of this stuff. But yeah, I mean, there's a reason that we're not all made from cookie cutters, right? We're not all the same. And that means that the way that we approach things, even if it's because we're neurodiverse or we've got a mental health thing going on or something to happen to us when we were kids or whatever, gives us some kind of perspective that other people don't have. And there's a lot of value in that. And we're trained by this society that wants us to be widgets, to think that we have to be like everybody else, when actually our power and our gifts may very well lie along all these things that make us not widgets.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you can, this is why I do have a real love affair with coaching, is when you can really listen to somebody and put your own judgments aside of what it should look like or what they should do, and listen out for the cues of where their strengths lie, things that are already working for them. And then you kind of clear all the other bits away, help them to clear those bits away, and just look at what you're left with. 9 times out of 10, when you get to that point, when I get to that point with a client, you hear them say, oh, like, there it is. I could just do that. And that would
Yeah.
be like, that would like work.
And it
Yeah.
probably seems somewhat obvious in retrospect too. Like, wow, why didn't I think of that before?
Oh, well, yes.
Yeah.
That's why I have a coach myself, and have people to help me see that too, because it's harder to do by yourself. Not impossible
Yeah.
at all, but it can
Right.
be harder to do by
It can
yourself.
be harder. And it's an interesting sort of, I'm not sure what the right word is, irony, symbiotic something. I don't know, but it's like, I really think all of us have the answers somewhere
Mm,
inside us. It's
mhm.
just that finding them and then giving them enough credit, because they came from us, right? They didn't come from
Yeah.
Oprah. They didn't come from, the big book that says this is how it should be done. So it's much harder to say, really, I can do that.
Mm,
That's where working with somebody else can be really, really helpful, because I can hear when I talk to somebody that little thing that they just said, that they're saying it, but they're not hearing it and they're not paying any attention to it. And you're just going,
yeah.
wait, go back there.
Yes.
You just said this thing that might unlock everything else.
Yes.
And they're never going to hear it on their own, but
No.
somebody else, yeah, we all do that.
Yeah. And like, in particular, because I'm interested in working with women and looking at the unique challenges that they have in entrepreneurship, and listening to that experience of what that actually is. And I hear so many women their give their knowledge, just throw away what is actually working, and how they delivered that win they have. So, if you ask somebody what went well this week, and they'll tell you what went well, and what helped you to get that win, what helped you achieve it. Oh, it's probably because it was a Tuesday, or I met Dave and he gave me the idea, or anything that's not actually, somebody asked me and I had to make a snap decision, and I found I was really good at that.
Yeah.
I just pulled it out the bag, and it took seconds, and it meant that we just got it done quickly, and everyone was happy about it. And that came from me.
Me.
Anything to avoid to avoid that.
Yeah. And as you're saying that, I'm thinking you're giving all your power away when you do that.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
think women have been so trained to give our
Yes.
power away that
Absolutely.
it's really hard to say, hey, wait a minute. I did that thing. That came from me. I deserve credit for that. And we all have trouble giving ourselves credit too, but women
Mhm.
somewhat more than
Yes.
others.
Yeah.
Probably everyone more than average white guys,
Yes.
who seem to have no trouble at all giving themselves lots of credit for things
Yep.
they didn't even do.
Mhm.
But um, as any woman who's ever sat in a meeting and offered an idea knows, when the guy takes it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we give it all the power away, and there's
Mhm.
something about, I think women are afraid of power. Like, we're afraid that it's going to make us
Mhm.
these horrible people who are
Yeah.
just all the time. When actually, if we recognize our power and own our power, it means we can run with it and we can do the things we want to do. And
Mhm.
if we give it away, then we're just sitting here going, oh, well, I didn't really have anything to do with that, and I don't know what to do now, and I don't know how to do this thing.
Yeah. And actually, like, going back to what we said earlier about the doesn't knowing everything bring a lot of pressure to a
Yeah.
situation, um, you can really start to see how, oh, actually, one of the things I've learned, ooh, since I've been coaching, really, is seeing, oh, actually, in that situation, probably my privilege got me there.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. That's nothing to do with, I could have been doing anything that day, and at the end it probably was my privilege that got me there.
Yeah.
Hmm. That's now interesting how other conversations, and I'm noticing that. And
Yeah.
And the same with my health. So I'm a really healthy person, and both physically and mentally. And sometimes the difference between me getting somewhere and somebody else not is our state of our health and the privilege I have and how I'm able to leverage that.
Right.
And the conversation starts to deepen and richen, and the judgment starts to dissipate.
Yeah. And I want to say, like, it's not that, the idea that you brought that ended up being a success wasn't your idea, and that you don't deserve credit for the idea, but it's certainly possible that your privilege put you in a position where you were better able to make that happen.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And suddenly, the shades of grey just start to multiply even more. The sense of what I'm in control of and not in control of.
Right.
It starts to lighten, because actually, those things, that voice that tells me that I'm in control of certain things, I need to be in control, I need to know these things. And like you were saying earlier about, it's not that I feel like I do these things perfectly and now I'm bestowing my experience on other people.
Yeah, no.
The reason, yeah, if only. The reason I'm in it is because I'm so curious. I'm still so curious about how other people are doing it, about the things that their experiences, about how that relates to me, about where there's still so much more for me to learn and to go. And that's what I think makes me good about my job, is that I'm still so curious about it. Still so want to be there. I want to be on that conversational level with people.
This has been so much fun.
Thank you.
That's this week's episode. Many thanks to Lisa Townsend for the fascinating conversation, and to you for joining me. You can find links to Lisa, the Ted Lasso clip I mentioned, and more at fycuriosity.com. And I hope you'll join the conversation on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find show notes, the 6 creative beliefs that are screwing you up, and more at fycuriosity.com. I'd also love for you to join the conversation on Instagram. You'll find me at fycuriosity. Follow Your Curiosity is produced by me, Nancy Norbeck, with music by Joseph McDade. If you like Follow Your Curiosity, please subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to tell your friends. It really helps me reach new listeners. See you next time.